Hey guys, your crazy coach lady Amanda Trombley here, and I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today about managing the crisis and chaos in your life to lead you towards handling it better and enjoying your life with the confidence and security as you continue to build your empire. So we are going to dig into what happens physically and emotionally in a crisis, and then of course, because we're always focused on growth, exactly how to pull out of our crisis or chaos mode and move forward with continuing our amazing betterment of self. So when it comes to crisis, we could be talking about a legitimate crisis in your life, something that is very stress-inducing, some sort of trauma or chaotic situation that is causing you to be propelled into crisis. Or we could simply be talking about, for you, a disalignment in your life. When you are disaligned in your life and your actions and behaviors are going against your beliefs and your desires, or you are trying to pull away from your past beliefs to create the life that you desire to be, you can easily be put into this stress management mode or this crisis mode. So whether you are dealing with a significant crisis or chaotic situation in your life, or you are just feeling this disalignment in your life as you pull away and pull towards what you truly desire, you could be undergoing some sort of mental and physical chaos or crisis management. And we no longer want to be in this because, bottom line, simply put, we want to feel good and we want to handle those life struggles with more ease. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it and let's talk about the physical side, the scientific side of what actually happens when we get in this disalignment, when we are propelled into this crisis or stress management mode. Now, automatically, what happens here is your brain goes into your survival mode. And if you followed me for a while, you know this because I talk about it all the time. It is not your brain's job to create pleasure. It is your brain's job to protect you from pain. And so when you're undergoing any sort of disalignment or crisis in your life, you begin to highlight that survival mode of your brain. Your brain begins to pull apart this situation and jump into the survival mode of I must protect. And it automatically goes into this quick save mode. And what happens in a quick safe mode, a survival mode of your brain, as you jump into protection, is your heart actually increases its beats per minute. And a lot of us feel this physically when we have an increase of anxiety or an increase of adrenaline. We can actually feel how our heart is beating faster. But what happens specifically when we're in this crisis or disalignment is that our heart begins to beat rapidly above 145 beats per minute. And what happens when our heart rate is this high is that it actually decreases our vision. It decreases our primary sense up to 70%. And when we are pushing so much blood through our system, what happens here is the blood begins to move to our muscles instead of our brain. So when we're looking at this in normal terminology, we can see how we begin to get flustered, we begin to get red, we begin to feel our heart beat out of our chest, and we almost begin to tense up in our neck, in our shoulders, in our arms, in our hands, and we feel that crisis all over our body. And that is actually because of the science, the physicality that's happening within your body. As your heart rate increases to over 145 beats per minute, your brain sends more blood, your body sends blood to your muscles instead of your brain. And so your brain is using less of what it needs. It has decreased vision, and our entire body begins to become tense. What happens when all of this is happening physically, it actually causes an emotional disturbance for us. And our logic begins to turn off. Remember, all of that blood is in our muscles instead of our brain, and we're already short one of our primary senses. So emotionally, our logic begins to turn off as adrenaline and fear increases. And as our fear increases, we get stuck in a mode between decision and action. And this typically, when we're dealing with any logic-based situation or any emotional-based situation, we have this thought process of looking at what is happening and deciding what is the best factor and then moving forward in action with that best factor. But when we are dealing with the physicality that is happening because of our crisis, our stress, or a disalignment, this logic begins to shut off as our adrenaline increases, and that gap between decision and action diminishes significantly. And so all of a sudden, we begin to have a thought and an action, which is so common when we're in crisis mode because we snap, we yell, we get violent, we begin to act out in ways that typically we regret because we are missing the logic element. We're missing that take a breath element that our brain needs in order to make proper decisions. And this happens because of that flight or fight method that we've heard about, talked about so often in mental health, in psychology, and in all of our, personal development talk so far. We begin to be thrusted into this fight or flight method of our brain, this survival mode, this quick save, to where we have a thought and we immediately decide and act without that logical sequence of looking at the consequences. The other side of this, the more significant side of this that can really begin to take a toll on your life and create those deeper regrets, is the panic and paralysis side of our psychology, to where now we're not only fight or flighting, but we are panic or oh my God, I'm gonna do it again. I'm not even gonna say it. You know what I'm saying. I said it right one time. So now we're stuck between full-blown panic or absolute shutdown. Shutdown emotionally, shutdown physically, shutdown of our actions, or acting way too quickly in a panic. And so what happens here is this disalignment, this stress, this crisis, this chaos in our life has created this slideshow effect of what happens from head to toe physically, which creates an even further rock slide head to toe emotionally, which allows us to be completely out of control of what we want to do and how we want to feel in these situations. And this is all super duper bad news because we lose control. And when we lose control, we all know how that feels. When we've lost control, we no longer have the ability to determine the end results of our actions. And so we want to move from this state of chaos, this state of panic, this state of fight or flight, and we want to talk about how do we pull out of this? Because the reality of the situation is bad things happen in life. Stressful things happen in this life. We are not, no matter how much good work we do for our mind, body, and soul, we are not going to be able to prevent bad things from happening. They are just sadly a part of life. And so now that we understand and we're aware of, and if you know me, you know that I believe that this awareness of what's actually going on physically and mentally is huge into regaining that control. And so now that we're aware of what's happening emotionally and physically, we have to begin to move towards the next step for us, which is beginning to pull out of this shitty situation and beginning to do something about it to where we can make better decisions and move away from the stress and crisis in an easy, more manageable fashion. And so the first thing that we want to do here is we want to decrease how fast our heart is beating per minute. We want to decrease these beats per minute, which will increase our blood to the vein, or our blood to the brain. It will take away from all of that blood that is surging through our muscles, and it will allow our brain to be supplied with the proper oxygen that it needs to function at the level that we need it to in order to make those primary proper decisions. So, the best way to slow your heart rate, and you know me, is absolutely breathing tactics. Beautiful grounding. Grounding is the best way to immediately slow your heart rate. Even if you're not feeling it, even if you're not super into your breathing exercises, even if your grounding techniques don't give you this aha feeling, by simply participating in them, you are doing the physical work that your brain needs you to do in order for it to function properly. So when it comes to grounding techniques, my favorite two are the box count breathing method, which is where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, then you breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you wait 4 seconds, and then you begin again. So you're breathing in, you're holding for 4, breathing out for 4. And we're talking 4 Mississippis, not just 1, 2, 3, 4, really allowing yourself to feel that breath. Now, the next step that I do, or my favorite personal grounding exercise when it comes to breathing that I do with all of my clients, takes this a little bit further, and it's the nostril breathing exercise, where you plug one nostril at a time, and you breathe in until you cannot breathe in anymore. What's beautiful here when you do this is you begin to release the tension and feel your lungs, your stomach, your chest, your shoulders, and you begin to really feel everything as you're doing this nostril breathing. So you begin by plugging one nostril and breathing in until your lungs are at max capacity. Then you hold that nostril hold that breath until you are at max capacity again, and you must release. And then you actually push that breath out. You really breathe out until you can feel that you've released all of the air inside your lungs. And then you move on to the second nostril, and you repeat that each nostril 4 times. Now, the great thing about the nostril breathing is that it takes a little bit of time, and so it gives you plenty separation between the crisis that you're experiencing and your current place of time. And so you have that time to really separate and get in tune with your body. The next thing that I want to talk about when it comes to pulling out of a crisis, of a disalignment, of a stressful situation, is emotion-focused therapy, emotional focused therapy. And I'm not talking about sitting on a couch and talking to your counselor about your really stressful situation, but I'm talking about that emotion-focused therapy that really plays on you slowing down and gaining awareness, pinpointing each of your emotions, whether you are experiencing fear, anger, or hurt in the midst of your panic. Really pinpointing what it is, exactly focusing your energy on the specific emotions that you are focusing on, or that you are feeling, focusing your energy on the specific emotions that you are feeling in the midst of the panic. Are you feeling threatened? Are you feeling insecure? And then moving forward with walking through this using my thought tracking technique, which if you've followed me, you've heard of, which tells you to recognize the emotion that you are dealing with, really identify why it is there, what is causing this, where has this emotion began to feel inside of me and become into fruition in my life. So what is the emotion? What is the starting point to that emotion? Why am I feeling that emotion? And then walking it back to an opposite approach where we begin to add in positive affirmations and positive action steps so that we take that emotion in the moment that is focused around the anger or the fear or the anxiety, and we walk that emotion from its core emotion to a thought to a positive affirmation to a positive action, both in the moment and in your future to prevent. So if you don't know the full length of the thought tracking video, make sure that you catch my thought tracking video because it is on YouTube. It is blasted everywhere, and it is one of those instrumental things that I use time and time again, and I think is a huge healing method. So step 1 to pulling out, use some grounding techniques to create some distance between you and the situation and allow your heart rate to settle and your blood to go back up to the brain so you can make a logical decision. Step number 2 is to use some emotion-focused therapy on yourself so you can gain awareness and pinpoint those emotions, and then use my thought tracking technique to walk your way back to a positive affirmation and positive action. And the last thing that I want to bring to you guys that will really help in situations of panic, stress, or disalignment is the cognitive distortions that we all face on a regular basis. Regardless of whether you have this or that diagnosis or whether you're just a regular Joe tuning in because you're trying to learn a little bit more about yourself, the majority of our human race deals with some sort of cognitive distortions. There's a list of 12 in the majority of psychology books, although as you begin to look, you'll find a lot more out there. And the bottom line is that, the simplified term of a cognitive distortion is a thought lie. It's a thinking lie. It's a way that you are repetitively thinking in a way that is not true. It's To give you an example, one of the cognitive distortions is minimizing or maximizing. And so when it comes to dealing with a cognitive distortion of minimizing or maximizing, it means that when you're thinking, when you're in panic, when you're in stress, you maximize the negative and you minimize the positive. And this is something that you might do in your life daily as you're talking to your friends. You maximize this negative aspect of your life and you leave out all of the really positive things in your life that you have. And so cognitive distortions are something that so many of us live in daily. It's so many of us are completely attached to the cycle of allowing these distortions to create constant patterns of thought lies in our life. And what happens here is they really affect your reality. They really reset you into a reality that is not accurate. So I advise you to take a look at the list that's everywhere, all over Google, of the cognitive distortions and begin to look at where are your cognitive distortions and exactly specifically where do you use them while you're in crisis. What cognitive distortions, and if you're me, you're not using just one, you're using 5 or 6 of them at a time. What cognitive distortions are you using in the midst of crisis that is magnifying the crisis itself, and then taking that a step further to look at where you use these in your everyday life, which is actually creating the crises that you're dealing with in the first place. Again, when we can become aware of anything, when we become aware of the cognitive distortion that we are suffering from, we can begin to take that specific work to walk it back and change it in our lives so that we're no longer suffering from it. So when it comes to managing crisis, when it comes to being in disalignment, when it comes to dealing with stress, we now know physically something happens within us, which creates a large emotional gap that allows us to not act in the way that we wish we would. But there's some very simple techniques, grounding, emotion-focused, and a list of your cognitive distortions that you can easily look through and undergo and kind of dive into a bit so that as you come upon this crisis again or you're dealing with something similar, you can easily begin to pull yourself out in a 5-minute span and allow yourself to breathe easier and move forward in the positive direction that you wish to go through without regret. That's all I have for this video. See you next time.